while the ANC had lost the support of traditional leadership in the past, they depended on people like Madiba to talk to influential chiefs and kings in order to fight against some laws introduced by the system, which laws were seen as oppressive. So this is how this interaction began, and this is how my father began to be a serious enemy, not only of the Transkei, government, but of the actual South African government. If you look at it well, it was not even a Bantustan then, because the Bantustan system began around 1976. So these issues were thrashed around 54, early 60s, when South Africa had no Bantustans, when Transkei was part of South Africa, So this is why my father had to be a direct opponent of the South African government, because only later did the Matanzimas began by becoming a black administration, some form of self-governance, long before 1976. And that's when roughly the politics, that what you call homeland politics, began. And they were obviously supported by the government. So my father and their group, they had to form an organization that would counter the Matanzima administration. And this is how they got closer to the ANC. And since then, they've been working hand in glove with the ANC until he left the country.
So, what is your relationship with the ANC?
My relationship with the African National Congress, it is based particularly on my father's history with the African National Congress. As a child, of course, I was ignorant. But if your father is born in a political organization, you are bound to be part of it. Or you are born to be against your father, you might just be against him. But it was natural that I followed in my father's footsteps, and not only by choice, but also I had to be secured from the rivalry of royalty within the clan. Unfortunately, the same political rivals to my father were the same rivals of royalty. So my father had to make sure I don't stay around here at all. Well, I hardly stayed at home. I was always either out in another province or out of the country. I left before my father left, because I think he felt that he is no longer safe, so he might need to escape. But I think he felt that he should first let some of the kids go. So I was one of those first kids to go. And I went to Botswana. And in Botswana, I lived with Winnie Mandela's sister, married to a unity movement activist called Mr. Saftin Vutela. I stayed with that family because they were Madiba's in-laws or brother-in-law of some kind. So they were related, and because we were related to Winnie, and they were already in exile, I think from the 60s. And that's where my father sought refuge for me. And that's where I did part of my primary school and part of my secondary school.
So now, is that when, although you're saying you're connected to the ANC because of your father,
Yes.
so when you were in Botswana, were you then connected to the ANC as your own person?
Like I'm saying, I was living in a unity movement house.
So you had no choice?
I had no choice.
So when you came back?
I joined ANC in exile because my life didn't end in Botswana. There was also another brother-in-law to Winnie, to Matiba, who was also married to another sister to Winnie. That was Mr. Tammy Bonga. He also came in when he thought that I'm not doing well in Botswana. He felt that if he took me and changed my environment, perhaps I might do better. But I think I was homesick, or I was getting confused more and more. But then I didn't do well in Zimbabwe as well. So he sent me back to Botswana. By that time, I was tired of being away from my parents. And I felt I just needed to go to my father wherever he was. And because my father was no longer in the country, that was must have been 1981, 82. He had left in 1980. Because I think at that time he was in Lesotho, between Lesotho and Mozambique, and those areas were not very safe for South Africans.
Yes.
And so they thought I cannot join my father there. And I think that's when our conflict began, until they really needed to take me to my father. Then I joined my father when he was already in Zambia, because he left Lesotho after the Lesotho raid. He was one of the survivors of that raid, together with my sisters and brother, and then left for Mozambique. He stayed in Mozambique until Komati Accord, when Samora Machel signed an agreement with the South African government of getting food supplies while they get rid of the ANC freedom fighters. So my father had to leave for Zambia. So he stayed in Zambia. That's where I met him.
So you joined him and you joined the movement?
Yes.
So that's when you joined the movement?
That's when I joined the movement.
So, and you've been a member of the ANC. Were you entrenched in the ANC? Were you a card-carrying member?
I would not call myself a card-carrying member. This is why sometimes we would describe ourselves as bona fide children of the African National Congress. I was living in any environment that the ANC was privileged to have in exile, because we varied. Some people were not as lucky as some of us. Some people lived in refugee camps, people who were under the United Nations or so. The ANC managed to either get support from the government of the day in that country and buy some houses in some cases, get support and be given some houses for leadership, or even to accommodate people who were running away from home, who were on transit, either on their way to school or on their way to the army. So I lived in those two environments with people going to the army, with people going to school. And of course, I hadn't been a good performer on the direction of school. So I thought the army was my best bet. But unfortunately, my decision was overruled. So I had to be taken to Tanzania, where Somafco was, which was a base for education, while Angola, on the other hand, was a base for military training. And then Lusaka served, of course, as the headquarters. So I found my way going to Tanzania. This is where I rebelled against going to school. You know. I stayed there until Krisani himself came to my rescue and got me out of Tanzania and straight to Angola, where I received my military training.
News that moves. eNCA.com.